Привit, greetings from Odessa Mama, and in today's live stream, 3 things to look out for in the upcoming week with respect to the Russo-Ukrainian war. This is normally what I outline on as Sunday. If you have any comments or questions, drop them down below in the comment section to this video. Most of you are going to watch it on replay. If you happen to be watching it live, let me know what you think of the latest developments. Now, normally I've gone for 3. Probably we're going to focus on 2 main upcoming events, and the first one is not directly connected here with what goes on in Ukraine. I'm here in Odessa at the moment. That is looking at the broader geopolitical context and the current situation in Iran. Iran is an ally of Vladimir Putin's Russia, and there have been street protests now. It must be going on for about 2 weeks, and they look particularly severe and serious for the mullahs who have been ruling the country for, I guess it's well over 40 years. And whilst Russia is not as dependent on Iran, or Iran is not as useful to Russia as it was back in 2022 when they actually helped Russia develop their kamikaze drone production. In the beginning, the Iranians basically handed over their kamikaze drones, so things like the Shahid drone, and then supply trainers to the Russian Federation. Russia has been able to create their own version, has their own production, so even if the current regime in Iran collapses and is replaced by a Western-friendly new government, it will not have a direct impact on Russia's ability to generate and produce and fire those weapons, at least not in the short run. And Iran also supplied a small amount of other missiles. It will, though, remove yet another ally in Russia's axis of authoritarianism that they play a part in. They've lost Maduro, at least as the leader in Venezuela, and that has consequences to do with their ability to sell oil. And we saw last year the leader of Syria, longtime leader of Syria, Assad, he fell, limiting Russia's power projection in the region, the broader region. So losing Iran as an ally would be another blow in Russia's general influence globally and its ability to be a global power. Not that it really is, but at least its ability to project its power outside of its region. It would really contain it outside of some of its limited remaining operations in Africa and their sabotage operations in Europe. It would really be seen as a regional power. So you see this kind of retraction of Russia's ability globally to influence affairs. Will this have a significant impact on the war if it comes to pass? It will not be a complete game changer. Maduro being replaced, maybe the mullahs of Iran now falling, that doesn't automatically mean that Vladimir Putin is going to suddenly get overthrown in a coup d'etat, although is a strong indication of the general trajectory. Russia, with this war in Ukraine, they have burned through a huge amount of their strategic reserves, both militarily and financially, and they're still stuck in Ukraine, controlling less than 20% of this country's territory. And they started the war back in 2014 with the first invasion and extended it in 2022. The Russian economy is in a lot of trouble. The actions of the Trump administration last 2 weeks have not played out favorably to Russia at all, with the US boarding parts of the Russian shadow fleet that helps them to export and sell oil around the world, or engage in the oil business in violation of the sanctions that have been imposed. So this is all going to put extra pressure on Russia's ability to generate the income necessary to continue their war. Remember that Russia is in a recession. They're spending their gold reserves to keep the war going. They have high inflation. And I even see that on a lot of now Russian vloggers on YouTube. There seems to be some final admission that the prices are going through the roof. It seems to be a major issue. So the economy is in a lot of trouble. They have high interest rates, so they can lower that, but then that's going to send inflation even higher. And they have been crowding out the economy with this war economy, and that's basically been allowing the government to spend a lot of money putting stuff theoretically into the economy, claiming that they're growing as they did claim in 2023 and 2024. However, that those investments don't provide a return, since you build a tank, it goes into Ukraine, gets blown up with presumably a few of the crew members in it. That isn't actually a productive use of your resources. It's not like they create a business that's going to continue to provide services to the local people in the Russian Federation. So we're seeing all these issues come to a head, and it's just another indication that Vladimir Putin is in a lot of trouble with his 3-day special military operation. We saw a 3-hour special military operation by the United States where they abducted Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. Vladimir Putin must have been looking on very envious, because he would have loved to have grabbed Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, or at least seen him flee within the first few days of the 2022 invasion. They are stuck here. Vladimir Putin, I made a video, maybe it's about a month ago, that he's basically trapped by this war because he has not achieved a strategic victory. So if he stops the war now, by even with these peace negotiations that I don't think are going anywhere, in large part because of this situation where Vladimir Putin's first priority is to stay in power. He'd love to have his legacy, that's his second priority, but priority is about, where we rate certain objectives in the hierarchy, and him staying in power is always going to be his first priority. And as a result, that means making a lot of decisions that are against national interest in Russia. And stopping the war, what's he going to be able to show for it? We've had over 4 years of this invasion. They have taken basically a land bridge from the Russian Federation directly along the coast of the Sea of Azov to the Crimean Peninsula. But in any case, they had a physical bridge that went across before they started the invasion in 2022, and they've lost so much treasure and so many personnel. And he outlined strategic objectives in that speech just a few days before the invasion in 2022. Overthrowing the government was one of them, in Ukraine replacing it. And destroying the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military, if he stopped now, will be way bigger than it was in 2022. Vladimir Zelensky is still in charge in Kyiv. Ukraine would still be able to stay outside of Moscow's sphere of influence, except for the parts that are under occupation, which Russia largely destroyed. If you look at the territory they conquered since 2022, they did take the city of Kherson without destroying it, but they had to retreat from it. So basically took Mariupol, completely ransacked the place, destroyed it. They may rebuild part of the city, but it's a shadow of its former self. They took cities like Melitopol maybe without destroying them. I've been there myself back in 2021, but no one in Russia, 99.9% of people have no idea it even exists as a city. The rest of these places they've taken over the last, say, 2 years, they completely destroyed. That's a net negative. They have to presumably rebuild it. It's just a complete and utter train wreck of an invasion, and to have to show that as the outcome. Yeah, I took a land bridge when we had a physical bridge, and we have all these wrecked cities, and the few that weren't wrecked, they're so small and no one knows who they are, no one cares about them in Russia. He's not going to be in a very good place, especially if those soldiers were to be in large part demobilized, come back. You're going to just have a lot of people who've been making a lot of money, remember, in the Russian army, huge sums of money, who are going to go back to presumably being expected to work for a few $100 in Russia, when they're probably traumatized from the sadism of this war, and they are not going to be the type of people that Vladimir Putin wants coming back without a result. So this is the strategic situation he finds himself in, which is just keep going forward and basically hope that somehow he turns things around and can achieve a strategic victory in Ukraine. As I said many times on this channel, Igor Girkin, the Russian ultranationalist, is one, a war criminal, but sitting in a prison in Russia because he is an opponent and a critic of Vladimir Putin. He said it about 3 months ago. I think he smuggled a letter. He actually published another, or he smuggled out another letter actually over the New Year's celebrations, repeating that he sees almost no chance for Russia to win strategically in the war with the current leadership, with Vladimir Putin. And the two most likely outcomes are that either it ends up in some sort of strategic impasse for the long term, basically they stop fighting, and both sides presumably try to get in a better position to restart the war at a future date, or Ukraine will just take back all its currently occupied territory. That's also the analysis that I have come to the conclusion to based on the evidence that we had. So definitely keep an eye out for all of what's going on geopolitically. It will have an impact on this war. I mean, another signal if the mullahs in Iran fall that Vladimir Putin is going to be pretty much in a panic probably at that stage when we see all these precedents being created for dictators who've been in power for a long time or a significant amount of time suddenly losing their grip on the throne. Also, keep a lookout for what happens in Greenland. This will be something that Vladimir Putin will be super excited about if Donald Trump suddenly tries to seize by military force Greenland, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark and NATO ally of the United States. It is absolutely batshit crazy that he would do that since there's no national interest. US can already put as many troops, so many bases, and sign mineral deals for anything they want to do in Greenland anyways, but he seems to be obsessed with actually conquering territory, at least enlarging the United States formally. Doesn't make much sense for the United States. I think the Congress will basically be able to persuade Donald Trump's administration not to take this step, but we don't know. Maybe he's just completely unhinged at this stage and starts to attack NATO allies. This would be a great boon for Vladimir Putin. So the opposite of the mullahs falling, it's if NATO falls, basically. In the meantime, I don't think that's going to happen, judging on what's going on at the moment, but definitely many sleepless nights in Copenhagen. Also, Cuba is probably in the crosshairs of the United States following the removal of Maduro. It's also a pet project of the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, since he is of Cuban ancestry. So this is something else that we can keep a side eye, just an eye on if that starts to escalate in some way in the Caribbean. So overall, I think that's the main thing to look for this week is what happens geopolitically globally with Iran, parts of Latin America, and Greenland all in a play to see what is going to happen. The second thing is as it's been for many months, how both sides, they strategically use long-range missiles to attack each other's country. Here, in Kiev, there was a huge series of strikes on the energy infrastructure. There's been widespread blackouts in Kiev. The mayor of Kiev, Klitschko, former famous world champion boxer, he asked the denizens of the capital city here to actually leave if they had the option because the electricity grid is going to be under so much pressure for the near term while they try to get all that repaired. We had a similar situation here in Odessa. It's probably about a month ago at this point, and it had even been an issue in the month before. So I think even back in November, there were periodic blackouts here in Odessa. Then we had a massive attack on the energy infrastructure and there was very little electricity. There was none for a few days and then gradually it's been restored. Now in Odessa, the electricity has been on. If we take the last week, I think it went out once for an hour. That's about it, at least where I am. So these things do tend to get repaired, even if it is catastrophic in the beginning, at least judging by Odessa. Here in Odessa, the temperature is about 10 degrees warmer than in Kyiv and in other parts of Ukraine, which are further north. So maybe that's why Russia didn't prioritize blowing up the energy infrastructure once again here in Odessa, since it's not as cold. So presumably it won't cause the same impact as it is causing in other parts of Ukraine where they are without electricity. Ukraine, on the other hand, will strike parts of the energy infrastructure also in Russia. Belgorod, the city across the border from Kharkiv, has been regularly hit, along with other border areas where the electricity is also compromised. Mainly they focus on trying to destroy Russia's ability to export its resources. That then funds, with the revenues from that, they fund the war here in Ukraine. So trying to put more pressure on the Russian economy, make it harder for Vladimir Putin to continue this war, or definitely push him in a position where he has to make harder decisions. In 2026, I am very skeptical that Vladimir Putin can continue this war without going for a mobilization. I had expected to come earlier, and now with Russia losing more soldiers than they're able to recruit for the first time in about 3 years, according to what the Ukrainians claim, at least. But I haven't claimed that before the Ukrainians, so it's possibly a very accurate assessment. Well, why bring it up now? They could have claimed this falsely if it were not the case before. But they are claiming that Russia is losing now more soldiers than they recruit. Russia always claims something around 30 or 40,000 per month, but Ukraine claims for the first time that they've gone in excess of that. If this is indeed accurate, then Russia is going to be in a very difficult situation, because if their army is getting smaller continuously and they are on the attack, where normally you lose about a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of your soldiers, this is going to be very hard to sustain and actually make much progress on the battlefield. It was in 0.7% of Ukrainian territory was net conquered by Russia in 2025. That it means that they will be fighting for many more years to even get to take Donbass, presumably, and Ukraine has now built new defenses there. So it would seem that inevitably Putin's going to have to make a big decision in 2026, also because funding for the war is going to become more difficult as it goes on, as their economy weakens and they spend officially 40% of the budget. The Russian budget goes on this war plus internal security. So expect all that to get a lot worse. But in the short term, we will see these attacks continue on the diplomatic front, which is the third point, and something that I don't spend very much time emphasizing because I don't see it going anywhere. We will have more talks, and now they're focused on security guarantees. If Donald Trump is threatening to annex Greenland, keeping the military option on the table, how credible do you think security guarantees are from the current US administration? It's absolutely nonsensical. If they're willing to attack a NATO member to acquire territory when it's definitely not in the US national interest, who's going to believe a security guarantee from the US under the current government? No one's sensible. So again, we'll see what wording they come up with, how they try to present it. But basically, I see this negotiation going nowhere. That will all change only when something happens materially to tilt the balance heavily in favor of one side, whether that's militarily, economically, or politically. Otherwise, both sides will keep fighting. Russia will keep trying to conquer Ukrainian territory while the Ukrainians try to defend and eject the Russians from the currently occupied territories. That's what I see happening for you to keep an eye on this week in this Russo-Ukrainian war. And this invasion has now gone on longer than what Russians refer to as the Great Patriotic War, which was the part of World War II that ran from 1941 and Operation Barbarossa, when Nazi Germany broke their alliance with the Soviet Union and invaded the Soviet Union. And when it ended with the, 1945 we're talking about already, when the war ended in Berlin. So it's actually gone on longer. And look how much progress they've made, especially in the last 2 years. Hardly any. They were in a better position in terms of conquered territory back in 2022 than they are in 2026. And the prognosis is that it's not looking like it's going to get better for Russia. If anything, it's looking like being a particularly bad year for Vladimir Putin. It definitely hasn't started off the best as we go into the second week of January. I'll leave it at that. Drop your comments down below in the comments section. And if you are going to come here to Ukraine, I have my guide down below. As I always tell you, you want to also wait to support this channel. And there, not only to get the logistical and safety information for traveling here to Ukraine, but also my hospitality guide, 4 or 5 cities: Odessa, Kyiv, Chernovtsi, Uzhhorod, and Lviv. They're the 5 most popular to visit, and you'll save you a lot of time in terms of figuring out where the best, my favorite at least, cafes, restaurants, bars, and shisha lounges are. Not much clubbing going on, although in Uzhhorod, everything is opening because there is no curfew in that part of Ukraine. Only part, and actually in Lviv, there's a lot of nightlife as well. Anyways, I will leave it at that. Slava Ukraini, do peremоги.